Imagine you have to deliver a hard truth to a colleague or, maybe a family member.
Mm.
But before you even open your mouth.
You're already doing the math in your head.
Exactly. You mentally wrap your words in bubble wrap. You rearrange the sequence of events so it doesn't sound too abrupt.
Right.
You prep like 3 separate compliments just to make sure the person listening doesn't get defensive. And you run through the entire history of the situation because they don't share your background.
Yeah, and that isn't just being polite. I mean, that is an invisible, totally exhausting form of manual labor.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's happening inside your head before a single word is spoken.
And it's a type of labor that goes entirely uncredited, mostly because, well, the people receiving the sanitized version of the truth, they have no idea the raw material even existed.
Yeah, they just think you're highly agreeable.
Exactly.
We are jumping straight into the deep dive today because we have a mission that feels universally relevant, especially if you have ever felt utterly drained simply by trying to, explain your reality to someone else.
Oh, absolutely.
We are looking at a brief but incredibly dense excerpt from a Substack piece. It's titled Episode 547, Reading Between Worlds Teaching in Translation.
And we should clarify right away, while the title uses the word translation, we are absolutely not talking about moving from, French to English or Spanish to Mandarin.
Right, no dictionaries required here.
Fun.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start where this dynamic is born. The text refers to a very specific space, the space between you.
Yeah, the context here is the translation of human experience. We're exploring the psychological weight of trying to make your internal reality legible to someone whose external reality looks completely different from yours.
And this space between you is known intimately by anyone who teaches, counsels, advises, mediates, or loves across what the author calls difference.
That list of verbs is so critical. Teach, counsel, advise, mediate, love. Because, every single one of those actions requires vulnerability. They're acts of profound, intentional connection. When you perform them across a difference, whether that's cultural, racial, socioeconomic, or even neurological, you are actively trying to construct a bridge over a gap in lived experience.
You're trying to reach the other side.
You are.
And there is a deep acknowledgement in the text that this bridge building can be, quote, sacred work.
Sacred work, yeah.
It implies that striving to understand someone else, reaching across that void of human isolation to make a genuine connection is one of the highest things we can do.
Yeah.
When it happens mutually, it feels like a miracle.
It really does. It's the foundation of how societies heal. It's how genuine learning occurs. But, and this is the big but, that sacred quality is entirely dependent on the effort being mutual.
Right.
And, crucially, voluntary. Both parties have to be carrying the bricks. Both parties have to be willing to walk out to the middle of the bridge.
Which means both parties have to be willing to feel a little unmoored, a little uncomfortable. Which brings us to a massive, really chilling pivot in the text. There is a specific point where this beautiful mutual bridge building mutates.
Yeah, it gets dark.
The phrase used is that there's a point at which bridge building becomes conscription.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this all mean? Because conscription is a severely intense word.
It is.
It means a military draft.
Mm-hmm.
It means being dragged into a conflict under threat of punishment. But, isn't adapting how we speak to different audiences just standard communication?
Right.
We all code switch to some degree. We don't talk to a CEO the same way we talk to a toddler. Why use such a severe, almost violent word to describe something so common?
What's fascinating here is the power dynamic that the word conscription introduces. You bring up a great point about standard social adaptation, but voluntary adaptation is a choice. You do it for efficiency or, out of affection.
Sure.
Conscription implies a systemic, non-negotiable demand. The choice has been completely removed.
Meaning, if I don't build a bridge, I don't survive the environment.
Precisely. Because the burden of translation rarely falls equally. The individual who sits outside the dominant culture, whether that's the only woman in a corporate boardroom, a person of color in a predominantly white institution, or, say, a neurodivergent person in a neurotypical office, they are the one drafted into doing the labor.
Wow. Yeah.
If they don't constantly build the bridge toward the majority, they don't get the job. They don't receive adequate health care. Or they just get labeled as difficult.
So that isn't a voluntary act of connection at all. That is a daily, exhausting campaign just to exist in a space without being penalized.
Exactly.
That completely flips the perspective. It's the difference between me volunteering to carry your bags because I want to help you versus me being required to carry your bags every single day just to be allowed to walk on the same sidewalk.
That's a great way to put it. The labor is identical, but the psychological toll is completely different.
And this conscripted labor, it's particularly insidious because it rarely looks like oppression from the outside, does it?
Oh, never. In fact, it usually disguises itself as professionalism.
Right. This is where the concepts get incredibly surgical. There's this staggering redefinition in the text of what we typically call good communication.
Yeah, prepare to have your resume ruined.
Seriously. I mean, if someone tells you that you have excellent communication skills, you usually put that straight onto your LinkedIn. You're proud of it.
Of course.
But the text argues that in these spaces of conscription, the expectation of good communication actually means you are expected to perform a grueling checklist of psychological tasks.
That's a heavy lift.
The verbs the author uses are so specific: soften, sequence, reassure, contextualize, and pre-digest reality.
We really need to look at the mechanics of each of those actions, because together they represent an enormous cognitive load. Let's start with soften.
Okay.
To soften a reality means you possess a hard truth, maybe about systemic bias or a failing project or just your own personal burnout, but you are not allowed to hand it over in its original form.
Because if you hand over a hard truth, it might have sharp edges. The person receiving it might get defensive. So you have to, file down those edges.
You use passive voice. You use qualifiers.
Yeah, you say, I might be mistaken, but, or perhaps we can consider you are taking the impact of the truth onto yourself so the listener doesn't have to feel the friction.
And then comes sequence.
Yeah.
This one is all about controlling the flow of information to manage the other person's emotional state.
Oh, I hate this one.
It's exhausting. You can't just give them the whole picture at once because the reality is too overwhelming for them. You have to spoon feed it.
Right.
You give them step one, wait for them to process it, assure them they are okay, and then slowly introduce step two. It is the conversational equivalent of a controlled demolition.
Which bleeds right into the next verb, reassure. This one feels like the heaviest burden of all.
Oh, definitely.
You are in the middle of trying to explain a difficult reality or a pain point, but simultaneously, you have to perform emotional triage on the person you are talking to. You have to comfort them. You have to reassure them that they are still a good person, that you aren't attacking their character, that they're safe.
Think about the psychological bandwidth that requires. You are managing their fragility while trying to advocate for your own reality.
And if you fail to reassure them, the conversation immediately derails.
Instantly, they become the victim and your original point is completely lost.
It's so frustrating. Then we have contextualize. Because the dominant group often lacks the lived experience to understand what you're saying. You can't just state a fact.
Yep.
You have to build the entire historical and social foundation for them before you can make a single point. You're acting as an impromptu historian and sociologist just to justify why you're upset about, a passing comment in a meeting.
And all of this labor culminates in the final, incredibly visceral phrase, pre-digest reality.
Pre-digesting reality. When I first read that, I immediately thought of Ike, a mother bird, chewing up food because the raw reality is too spicy or too tough for the baby bird, or in this case, the dominant group to swallow.
That's a very vivid image.
Or, I also thought of PR departments. Think about how a corporation handles a massive data breach.
Oh, yeah.
They don't just hand the raw, terrifying data over to the shareholders. The raw data would cause a panic.
Right, everyone would sell their stock.
Exactly. So a team of analysts and PR experts swallows the data, breaks it down, sanitizes it, and regurgitates it as a smooth, non-threatening executive summary with a bunch of positive spin.
That PR analogy is spot on. The text is suggesting that marginalized individuals are forced to act as a one-person PR firm for their own existence. They chew up their own reality so it becomes a smooth paste.
But we have to ask why this intense sanitization process is necessary. And the text gives us the answer. This labor continues until reality is safe for dominant norms to consume.
Safe to consume.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are looking at the mechanics of cognitive dissonance. The dominant norms, which could be a dominant racial group, a patriarchal structure, or just the established corporate hierarchy, they have a very specific worldview.
Right.
When they are presented with a raw reality that challenges their comfort or, implicates them in a problem, their psychological immune system kicks in. They will reject it. They'll deny it.
So to bypass that immune response, the speaker has to do the pre-digesting. You act as a human shock absorber.
Exactly.
You take the blunt force of the truth, process it internally, and present something palatable.
And the trade-off is devastating. There's a line highlighting the exact point at which professionalism becomes less about clarity than about atmospheric management.
Atmospheric management. Wow. That phrase is a total paradigm shift.
It really is.
It perfectly describes those moments where your entire goal isn't to solve a problem or communicate an idea, but simply to keep the vibes in the room from turning toxic. You're essentially acting as the human thermostat for other people's egos.
But look at what is being sacrificed here. Professionalism, in theory, is supposed to be about efficiency, clarity, truth. But in a conscripted environment, clarity is a liability. If you speak clearly, you disrupt the atmosphere. The dominant group feels uncomfortable, the vibes shift, and then you are penalized for being unprofessional.
So, to maintain the atmosphere, you obscure the truth.
You bury it
And,
under softening, sequencing, and reassuring.
which creates a profound internal crisis for the person doing all this managing.
Yeah.
This leads to what might be the most heartbreaking realization in the entire deep dive.
Yeah.
The text points out that there is a point at which the most praised version of you is also the one most thoroughly edited for other people's comfort.
It is a brutal irony. Society looks at the person performing all this atmospheric management and rewards them. You get told, oh, you're so articulate, you navigate office politics so well, you're a joy to work with.
You might even get promoted.
Exactly. You are celebrated as a success story of integration or professionalism.
But the entity they are praising is a heavily redacted document.
Mm-hmm.
It's a version of you with all the complex, challenging, messy parts just blacked out with a Sharpie. You're being handed a trophy for how successfully you have erased your actual self to maintain their comfort.
And the bridge you thought you were building to connect two human beings, it isn't a bridge at all.
What is it?
It's a runway. It's a paved surface built entirely out of your own edited identity, designed so the dominant culture can walk all over it without ever having to adjust their stride or look down at the gap.
A runway, not a bridge. Man, that distinction alone makes you rethink every quote-unquote successful interaction you've had in a power dynamic.
It really does.
And it perfectly sets up the second half of the excerpt, which falls under the heading teaching and translation. Because once the heavy, exhausting reality of conscripted communication is established, the tone of the text takes a drastic turn.
It becomes incredibly sharp. It shifts from analytical to, honestly, biting.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The voice drips with this earned sarcasm. The author directly addresses the people who are on the receiving end of all this pre-digested reality. They write, there are people who think translation is mostly about words, and then, sitting there completely isolated on its own line, bless them.
Bless them. It is the ultimate Southern-style dismissal.
Oh, totally.
It's polite on the surface, but underneath it is a devastating critique of ignorance.
It's so condescending,
Yeah.
but I mean, you can't help but feel it's entirely justified after unpacking the labor we just talked about.
Oh, for sure.
The text continues by mocking this naive perspective. It describes people who imagine dictionaries, parallel text, a tidy little bridge between one language and another.
Yeah.
And it ends with, how civilized, how quaint.
Yeah.
So if real translation isn't a tidy little bridge built with dictionaries,
Right.
is the underlying message that true communication across different worlds is inherently supposed to be untidy? Like, is it supposed to be messy and uncomfortable?
This raises an important question about what we actually value in our social interactions. From a young age, we are conditioned to value civility, neatness, order.
Right. Keep it clean.
We want the parallel text. We want my lived experience to map perfectly onto your lived experience with a direct one-to-one translation that causes zero friction. But that tidy bridge is a complete myth.
And the myth is solely maintained by the person doing the invisible labor.
Exactly. The bridge only appears tidy and civilized to the people who never have to sweat to build it.
Yeah.
If you're just strolling across the bridge, you don't see the structural engineering.
You don't see the black.
You don't see the atmospheric management or the psychological redactions that went into paving it. You just look around and think, wow, what a quaint interaction. We understand each other perfectly.
It's the equivalent of going to like a highly curated, sanitized resort in a foreign country and coming back claiming you deeply understand the culture.
Yes.
You didn't experience the raw reality. You experienced a pre-digested product specifically designed to keep you from feeling out of place.
And that is why the tone of bless them is so vital here. It's pitying. The people who demand that the world be softened and sequenced for them are actually living incredibly shallow lives.
Because they're demanding comfort.
Right. And by demanding comfort, they ensure they never actually encounter the raw, unedited humanity of the people around them. They think they're connecting, but they are just living in an echo chamber of their own dominant norms.
So there's a dual tragedy happening. The dominant group is trapped in a state of naive, comfortable ignorance, bless them, while the marginalized individual is slowly burning out from the conscription of keeping up the civilized facade.
It forces a total reevaluation of what we consider a successful conversation.
Yeah.
If a conversation across differences is perfectly smooth, if there's no awkwardness, no misunderstanding, and no momentary discomfort, it probably isn't a genuine connection.
Because someone is carrying the weight.
Exactly. It's highly likely that one person is doing an immense amount of atmospheric management to keep the other person comfortable. True translation of human experience involves stumbling. It involves grappling with concepts that do not easily cross the divide.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening conceptual journey. We started by looking at the space between us and how the sacred mutual work of bridge building can warp into conscription.
A forced draft into emotional labor.
Right. We completely dismantled the traditional idea of good communication, revealing it to be this grueling process of softening, sequencing, and pre-digesting reality just to manage the atmosphere of the room.
We explored the psychological cost of being praised for a heavily redacted version of yourself. And ultimately, we exposed the tidy little bridge of translation as a comfortable illusion maintained for those in power.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to turn this directly back to you, the listener. Take a hard look at your interactions this week, whether that's in your workplace, your community, or, even your own home. Are you currently running a one-person PR firm for your own reality?
Are you doing atmospheric management, editing your actual self into a sanitized version just to keep the vibes safe for someone else?
Or, on the flip side, are you the one expecting reality to arrive pre-digested? Are you demanding a tidy little bridge from the people around you without realizing the massive labor they are doing to build it?
It is a challenging, really uncomfortable mirror to hold up. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you navigate those spaces.
Yeah.
We discussed how the most heavily praised version of ourselves is often the one most thoroughly edited for other people's comfort. So consider this. What would happen and what structures or relationships might fundamentally break if just for one day you stopped softening the edges? What would happen if you offered the world your raw, unedited, untidy translation?
What happens when you start managing the atmosphere and finally let the weather do what it's going to do? It might not be quaint and it certainly won't be tidy, but as we've learned today, the unedited reality is the only place where true sacred connection can actually happen. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.